I never believed in ghosts. I mean, I knew people had their stories, but I always figured they were just that, stories. That was until something happened to me when I was home alone one night that made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. I was in my late 20s and had just moved into my own apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a small place, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd always been the type of person who loved the quiet, the peacefulness of being alone. It was after a long, exhausting day at work when it started. It was about 9 p.m. and I had just gotten home, feeling completely drained. The apartment was dark, save for the dim light from the street lamp outside filtering through the window. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I certainly wasn't in the mood to entertain, so I made myself some food, plopped down on the couch, and turned on Netflix. I think I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I woke up to the sound of a door closing. I blinked, disoriented, my eyes still adjusting to the darkness of my room. My first thought was that I was my roommate, but then I remembered I was alone. My roommate had moved out a few months ago. The apartment was all mine now. I sat up straight, my heart suddenly racing. I swear I heard a door creak, slowly, almost deliberately. It came from the hallway. My eyes darted to the dark corridor, trying to make sense of what was happening. I hadn't heard any footsteps, just the sound of the door. I told myself it was just the wind or the building settling. Maybe it was the apartment's old wooden frame, making noises in the cool night air, but still, the sense of unease crept in. I grabbed my phone, thinking maybe I could just call someone, anyone, but as I swiped the screen to unlock it, I noticed the time. It was 11:42 p.m. I hadn't heard a thing for almost 2 hours. My phone had died while I was asleep, and I didn't remember hearing anything else during that time. Had I really been asleep for that long? How had I missed it? I stood up, trying to calm my racing heart. Maybe I had forgotten to lock the door or something, and it was just the sound of a gust of wind pushing it open. I decided to check the front door. But as I stepped into the hallway, the temperature in the apartment felt off, cold, like the air was thicker than usual. The kind of cold that makes your skin prickle and your breath come out in little visible puffs. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. The hallway light flickered once, then again. I told myself it was probably just an old bulb, nothing more, but then I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper. I froze. It didn't sound like a voice, not exactly. More like a sound just barely above a murmur, something that could easily be mistaken for a draft or the hum of an appliance. But I could swear it was there. The hairs on my arm stood up, and a chill ran down my spine. I felt like someone was watching me. I turned slowly, heart hammering in my chest. The door to the bathroom was slightly ajar, just enough to make me nervous. I was sure it wasn't like that before. It had been fully closed earlier when I'd passed by. I made my way toward the bathroom, my feet heavy with every step. As I passed the door, I could feel something cold, brush against my skin. I whipped my head around, but the bathroom was empty. The air was thick, and the lights overhead flickered again, making the shadows dance along the walls. I backed away slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears. That's when I noticed the smell. It was faint at first, but as I stood there in the hall, it grew stronger. The unmistakable scent of something sweet, almost like rotting fruit. It was overpowering. I rushed into the kitchen to grab a candle, trying to ignore the tightening sensation in my chest. I'd opened the windows to air out the apartment earlier, but it hadn't been enough. The smell lingered, suffocating me, as if it was coming from every corner. I heard it again. This time, it wasn't a whisper. It was louder, unmistakable. A door creaking, but it wasn't the front door this time. It came from the back bedroom. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing, trying to think of any logical explanation. A breeze? No. My bedroom window was shut tight. I slowly approached the bedroom, trying to keep my breathing steady. I pushed the door open with a slow, careful motion. The room was empty, but the air was thick with that same sweet smell, now cloying and suffocating. My eyes landed on the floor near the bed, where something shiny caught my attention. At first, I couldn't tell what it was, but as I stepped closer, my stomach turned. There, right in the middle of the floor, was a puddle of something dark. Something that looked disturbingly like blood. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. but it wasn't blood. No, it couldn't be. I bent down, closer to the stain. It was sticky, almost syrup-like. My mind spun in circles as I tried to figure out what I was seeing. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and drawn out, like a whisper against the back of my neck. Get out. I didn't even think. I turned on my heel and bolted out the room, heart hammering in my chest. It didn't stop until I was standing outside in the cool night air, gasping for breath. I called a friend and begged them to come pick me up. I couldn't even bear the thought of going back inside, let alone spend another second in that apartment. When they arrived, I told them everything, about the whispers, the creaking doors, the strange sticky stain. They tried to calm me down, but even they couldn't deny the fact that something was wrong with the place. They insisted I should call someone to check it out, maybe a maintenance guy or someone to see if there was any issues with the plumbing. I never went back. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that whatever was in that apartment was watching me. I don't know what it wanted or what it was, but I can't ignore the cold, the smell, and the feeling that someone or something was waiting for me to make a mistake. I've debated whether or not I should share this, but after hearing so many similar stories, I feel like I have to. What happened to me wasn't just a random series of events. It felt deliberate, like someone or something was playing a game with me. I wish it were just a bad dream, but I know deep down it was real. This all started last summer, in the middle of June. I had just moved into a new apartment in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The place was a little older, but it was cozy, and the rent was cheap. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found it so easily. The landlord was a sweet older woman who had lived in the building for decades, and she gave me a tour, explaining that everything in the building was well maintained. But there was something off about the whole place. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe it was because I was in a new city, or because I was living alone for the first time. But there was an unsettling feeling about the apartment, something I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. It started with little things, like I'd hear faint knocks at the door when no one was there, just soft, repetitive taps. At first, I thought it was my neighbor, but whenever I opened the door, no one was ever around. I brushed it off, convinced it was just the old walls creaking or my imagination getting the best of me. But then, it started happening more often, sometimes multiple times a day. The knocking would always happen when I was home alone. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe the pipes were just old, and there was some kind of weird sound bouncing through the walls. But then one evening, I heard it again. Only this time, it wasn't just a tap. It was louder, more insistent, almost like someone was trying to get my attention. I remember feeling that strange, cold sensation creeping up my spine, like someone was watching me. I got up to answer the door, but again, when I opened it, nothing. Just an empty hallway, dimly lit by a single overhead light that flickered intermittently. That's when I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. One night, I was in bed trying to sleep when I heard it again, a soft tap, then another, and another, until it felt like the sound was coming from all around me. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing. I went to the door and threw it open, expecting to find something, or someone, standing there, but there was nothing. I stood there a few moments, staring down the empty hall. The silence felt suffocating, almost unnatural. That's when I noticed something strange. The light above the stairs was flickering again, only it wasn't the usual random flicker. It was like it was pulsing. Bright, dim, bright, dim. I couldn't help but stare at it, transfixed. I couldn't explain it, but something about it seemed wrong. I had been trying to tell myself that I was just stressed out. I was new to the area. I didn't know anyone. Maybe it was just the isolation making me paranoid, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. I felt like there was something out there. A few days later, I decided to check the building's history, hoping that maybe the strange occurrences could be explained by some natural cause. I asked the landlord if she knew anything about the building's past, but she was strangely tight-lipped. She simply told me, "Oh, it's an old building. Things happen sometimes. Don't worry about it." That only made me more uneasy. but still, I tried to push it aside. I figured that if I ignored it, it would go away. Then, one evening, as I was heading out to grab some dinner, I noticed something strange by the elevator, a piece of paper crumpled up and tucked underneath the doorframe. I reached down and pulled it out, my fingers brushing against the faded edges of the worn sheet. I unfolded it, expecting some kind of advertisement, but what I found was a message written in an uneven, almost frantic hand. Leave before it's too late. My stomach dropped. I felt an ice-cold chill run through me, and I immediately looked around. The hall was empty, still, quiet. But that message, who had left it, and why? I showed it to a friend later that night, and she thought I was just overreacting. She laughed it off, saying it was probably just some weird prank, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't. Whoever had written that note had left it for a reason. The days that followed only got stranger. I'd wake up to find items in my apartment moved, my books out of place, my kitchen utensils rearranged. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me uneasy. I started locking the door every night, double checking, even triple checking, even though I'd never done that before. But then came the night I'll never forget. It was around midnight when I woke up suddenly, my eyes snapping open like I had heard something. I lay in bed, listening for any sound that would explain why I was awake. Then, it came. A soft tapping, closer this time, right outside my window. I froze. My heart thudded in my chest. It was almost rhythmic, deliberate. I slowly, cautiously pulled the curtain back, peering out into the dark, but there was nothing there. No one in the parking lot below, just the empty street. I shook my head, trying to convince myself that it was just the wind. But then, I noticed something else. A shadow. It wasn't moving, but it was there, on the other side of the glass. I could see it clearly. It was tall and thin, with an angular shape, and it was right outside my window. I quickly stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. I scrambled to grab my phone, but before I could even dial, the shadow disappeared, vanished into thin air. I didn't sleep a wink that night, and the next morning I packed my things, ready to leave, but as I was walking out, I bumped into the landlord in the hallway. She looked up at me with this strange, almost knowing expression and said, "I'm sorry you're leaving. I told you to be careful." I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head, smiling sadly. "You should have listened when I told you the building had its secrets." That was it. That was the last thing she said before I walked out, never looking back. To this day, I still don't know what happened. I've thought about it so many times, about the tapping, the shadows, the message. There is a part of me that wonders if maybe I wasn't supposed to leave. Maybe there's something in that building, something that needs to be fed or watched, and I wasn't supposed to break whatever cycle was in place. But the thing is, I know I made the right decision by leaving, and I can't shake the feeling that someone, or something, is still out there, watching. So, if you're ever in an old apartment building, and you start hearing those soft knocks, or see a shadow that doesn't belong, listen to your gut, get out, before it's too late.